I live in the United Kingdom, a very mild country in many aspects. It is by no means one of the coldest countries, nor is it one of the hottest. The British are in a part of the world where storms never cause too much damage, where critters cause no real pain, and where wild animals are tame and small in stature. If you were to talk to any Brit about the weather, the responses you would get would create the vision of a rainforest downpour daily. However, the little island of the United Kingdom just off the coast of mainland Europe is a tranquil, safe place to be. So one can only imagine the British public's surprise when stories began to hit the headlines of the papers, describing the sightings of giant cats roaming the English countryside. My name is Luke Mordew, and this urban legend is the Beast of Bodmin Moor. It is not unheard of to witness the cute, fluffy grey squirrels that seem to live amongst every tree in England. But you may not know that these creatures are legally considered invasive. The British squirrel had brown fur and was much fluffier than its grey cousin. It was in the 1800s that the greys were introduced to the countryside of Britain. This was, unfortunately, back before our more modern understanding of the changes in our ecosystems. The grey squirrel carried a disease that did not seem to affect their health, although it would prove fatal amongst our native red squirrels. This, mixed with the fact that grey squirrels are far more likely to eat green acorns, meant that they would decimate much of the food source before they could ripen to the point that the reds could make use of them. The result is that I could walk 20 feet from my house right now and witness a grey squirrel. And yet, in my entire life, I have never seen a red squirrel with my own two eyes. In medieval times, rabbits were brought to the shores of the UK from Spain and France, quickly adapting to become part of our ecosystem. Even now, there are news reports of Asian hornets finding their way into our countryside, inadvertently causing potential havoc on our delicate food chain. It was not until 1976 that the Dangerous Wild Animals Act came into law. This limited private individuals in keeping exotic animals, ensuring that if they were to do so, they would do it with a license and in a circumstance that would create no risk to the public or the animal itself. That said, there will always be those that manage to sneak illegal imports onto our shores for whatever reason they deem necessary. It is also somewhat inevitable that these animals will occasionally escape and join our countryside. This has, in fact, happened on more than one occasion, and once they're out there, if they're not caught, they can either join our ecosystem, die amongst it, or destroy it. In my telling of a fictionalized event on the Bodmin Moor, we will follow Arthur as he takes his border collie for a walk across the moors on a cold Sunday afternoon. The skies were grey over the moors of Bodmin that Sunday evening. The air was still damp from a day of drizzle, yet the rain had finally subsided. The cold of November was here, with each passing day seemingly more bitter than the previous. Arthur made sure to wrap himself up warm, feeling the chill far more than he had done in his more youthful days. Walking up the moor with his border collie his wife had named Winslow, before she passed a few years before due to cancer. The weekend was good. He had spent it with his grandchildren, who had filled his days with excitement and joy during their short stay. By the time they left that morning, he was filled with mixed feelings, partly happy to have some peace and quiet, mostly saddened that the silence would be returning once again. Perhaps this is why he had taken Winslow for a walk on such a grey, dark, late afternoon. Maybe he was avoiding that quiet for a little longer. The moors were extensive, and at times he could walk for long periods before any signs of another human would appear. But today seemed especially empty. It wasn't warm or dry, not to mention the fact that it was a Sunday. Instead, he imagined that many dog walkers and hikers he would find on this vast landscape were at home, watching television by the fire after a large roast dinner. Arthur unhooked the lead from Winslow's collar, allowing him to rush off, stopping every few feet to sniff the ground, studying all the wildlife that had passed by with his snout. Arthur smiled at his furry little friend before taking a deep breath, looking out onto the beautiful landscape of the moors around him. He studied the yellows, golds, and greens that spread for miles over the bumpy fields ahead. He studied the rocks and mounds formed over thousands of years on the grounds. So much of the country had become urbanized over the years, with supermarkets, shops, car parks, and housing estates spreading on what seemed to be every bit of land available. He felt so lucky to stand amongst such a widespread view of nature, to disappear from people everywhere and just be alone with the natural world. He sighed to himself, spotting the skies darkening in the distance. "All right, boy, time to go," he called, turning to Winslow's direction, just spotting his tail as he disappeared between a small mound of rocks ahead. He called out to him again, this time more commanding to ensure his return. But strangely, he did not. Arthur paused for a minute, confused by this. Winslow was very well trained with his recall, and it was extremely unlike him to ignore his owner's beckoning. Arthur called again, pacing towards the mound of rocks to find him, frustrated by every slip on the wet grass and moss-covered rocks below his feet. He finally arrived at the mound, calling out one last time before turning the corner, now with an added sigh as he asked what Winslow was playing at. Still, before he could finish his sentence, he paused, noticing the carcass of a deer lying flat on the ground, with Winslow pacing around it, sniffing at it curiously. Arthur dove forward, grabbing Winslow by the collar and pulling him away while studying the body that rested there. There was no doubt that this deer did not die of natural causes. Its throat had been bitten into and ripped open, with large gaping holes in its neck and torso. It looked as if it had been attacked by an animal, although the wounds seemed far too deep and far too large to be that of a fox. Arthur hooked Winslow's lead to his collar and gripped it tightly around his fist to ensure that he could not pull away. He had never seen him act so strangely. He was so on edge, so distracted by whatever it was he could smell. Arthur studied the carcass further with curious eyes. It was clear that this kill was fresh, and that, whatever the culprit was, it couldn't have been too far away. He wondered if it could have perhaps been a large dog, although it would have had to have been very big and very quick. He turned his head to look into the distance, wondering if he could see any anxious dog walkers with a blood-soaked large breed scurrying home. But there was nothing. No sign of any life out in this open-plan corner of the country. But before Arthur could think for much longer, Winslow's tone had changed again. His fur had begun to rise from its skin, his hind legs digging into the ground beside them as his teeth began to show, emitting a deep and threatening snarl into the rocks. Arthur wanted to turn and ask him what was going on, but before the thought could even enter his mouth, all of his previous questions had been answered instantly, opening up his mind to far more in the future. He looked up to see that on top of the mound of rocks were the large paws of a black panther edging to the side, slowly revealing its broad, thick head above its intimidating, muscular body. And although Winslow was growling and snarling at the beast's blade-like claws and dagger-like fangs, its eyes did not move away from Arthur. Perhaps it understood him to be an easier target, or maybe it was that he was closer to the beast. No matter the reason, he did not look ready to play. Arthur, in his shock, remained still, unsure on what to do. If he was to turn and run, the beast would definitely chase after him. At least by staying still, it was remaining staring him down, gleaming at him with its large, marble-like yellow eyes. Winslow pulled forward, eager to dive at the beast and give it a fight. This, in turn, pulled Arthur forward slightly too, causing the beast to grip the rocks below its claws, ready to pounce at him. In the fear this created, Arthur opened his hand, letting go of the lead, allowing Winslow to charge forward, disappearing around the rocks as he attempted to get up to attack the large creature above. The beast was momentarily distracted, its eyes finally unlocking from Arthur's to see where Winslow had gotten to. Arthur knew that this was his moment to get away. He turned as fast as he could, stumbling over the grass as he headed further into the moors, the only place he could go at this stage. He had only made it a few feet before the cat had jumped from the rocks, ready to charge at him and rip away at his flesh. But the moment the thud of his paws echoed through the ground, Winslow appeared around the rocks, setting at the beast with full force. Arthur knew that his poor dog was not going to be able to win this fight, but he appreciated the effort he was putting in to protect his elderly owner, as the Beast of Bodmin and Arthur's furry best friend began to scrap beside the rocks. Arthur could hear the yelps and growls from both animals as he charged as fast as he could, refusing to look back, partly so he didn't have to slow down, and partly because he didn't want to see his friend die so violently. Finally, Arthur arrived at a large rock formation that was not too far away. Inside, they had formed a somewhat cave-looking structure, tiny and not very deep, but enough to give him a good chance to hide. He quickly dove inside, slamming himself to the ground, pushing his body against the wall as hard as possible, desperately wishing to become as small as he could in the shadow of the rock formation. He sat there, his frail hands trembling, his eyes filling with tears as he listened to his friend's final moments, still putting up a good fight against the beast that resided so close behind. And with a whimper and a gentle, sudden cry, Winslow's growls had abruptly stopped. Arthur was now alone on the moors, hiding in wait, hunted by the black shadowy creature that strolled through the moors behind him. He could now hear nothing but the gentle whistle of the wind against the long grass, peering through the small gaps in the rocks that surrounded him. He was tired of life, worn down from the weekend, exhausted from the walk and drained by the sudden attack. He was too tired to feel fear, too numb to mourn the loss of his friend, but his instincts remained, keeping him quiet and hidden from the dark hunter. He kept his eyes on the opening to the small mound he was inside, whilst placing his hands on the floor beside him, grabbing a large rock, the sharpest and most deadly one he could find. He put it in his lap, his hand gripping it tightly. It was cold and bitter to the touch, but he would not let go, sitting there in the shadow, closing his eyes to rest. As far as Arthur understood it, he had near enough blinked, resting his eyes for a few moments before opening them again. But judging by the darkness that had seemingly appeared in the sky outside, he must have slept for at least half an hour. His body was numb, his fingers stiff as he struggled to clench a fist. He could see the condensation of his breath in the air with every deep exhale. The rock in his lap seemed no warmer by his body heat, now sitting like a hard block of ice on his legs. As if all of his reflexes and thoughts had been slowed down by the cold, he had only just realized that he had been woken by a sound on the other side of the rocks. Something slowly crawling across the grass. He grabbed the rock in his hands, holding it tightly as his breath left his body. It drew closer, sniffing the ground as if it was trying to smell him, hunting his location. He looked out onto the moors through the gap in the rocks. He watched the long grass sway in the wind under the glow of the moonlight above. He slowly raised his hand, the rock gripped between his fingers. He knew that the moment it came in, he would need to swing down upon its head to fight. His chances of winning or surviving this hunt were slim to none. He knew this, of course, but it was worth a go. He listened carefully as its footsteps grew closer to the opening, until he finally saw it. But to his surprise, he did not see the shadowy beast's eyes emerge from around the rocks. Instead, he saw the pained, sad eyes of Winslow, who was searching for his owner with an overpowering limp. Arthur instantly dropped the rock to the ground, his eyes filling with tears as he crawled forward, gently guiding his friend into the safety of the small cave. He placed him on his lap, laying him down whilst holding him tightly, stroking his soft fur on the top of his head. Arthur could just about make out the thick liquid that covered Winslow's body, showing as black under the blue shades of the moon above. He could see that there was no way his little friend was going to survive. And as he looked down at Winslow's face, lying with his eyes closed, he couldn't help but feel that they both knew he was going to die. As if he wanted to be with his friend, getting some last-minute pets for being such a good boy. Arthur stroked down his head and body, ensuring to miss out on the gaping holes in his side from the beast's claws and teeth. His hand was covered in blood, but he didn't care. He wanted his friend to be as comfortable as possible. And so they sat there together, Arthur whispering, "Good boy," on repeat, as Winslow's little heart slowed down to a pause until he was gone. Arthur remained still, sitting in the shadow of the small cave in the middle of a large moor, miles from the nearest person, hours from the next dog walker. Even if the beast did not find him, it would seem that the cold of the night would. This much he knew. Unfortunately, this didn't seem to be an option. Arthur wiped the tears that had already turned cold on his cheeks and looked out onto the shadowy moor once again, where he was greeted by two large yellow eyes staring at him from the darkness ahead. Slowly he watched as the beast emerged in the moonlight, edging towards him with hunger in its eyes. Arthur slowly placed Winslow on the floor and grabbed the rock beside him. He could feel his body's pain, and although the cold was hard to ignore, he knew he would fight, just like Winslow had done before his end, just as his wife had done before hers. Over the next few weeks, Arthur's family and those of his village had searched the moors for long periods, with most assuming he had fallen or somehow gotten lost in the cold winter air. But during those weeks, no sign was ever found of him or his dog. There were rumours that perhaps the Beast of Bodmin Moor had gotten him, although this was always said with a slight pinch of salt. To most, it was another missing person case that would remain unsolved forever. No bodies ever to be found. Not of them or the mysterious creature that lurked amongst the moors of Bodmin. The urban legend of big cats amongst the Greenlands of the United Kingdom has been part of our culture for longer than I believe most of us would imagine or expect, with many people believing it to be true. The existence of big cats has even been made into an acronym under the title of ABCs, standing for Alien Big Cats or Anomalous Big Cats. Since as far back as the 1760s, when the radical William Cobbett claimed to see a giant cat at Waverley Abbey near Farnborough as a small boy, the sightings of invasive cats have been well documented across our culture. One of the main reasons the urban legend of the big cats roaming the countryside has remained a mainstay in British culture is the mystery accompanying them. Not only is there the question of their existence to begin with, but there is also the question of how they arrived in Britain. Had they been released on purpose? Had they escaped? Were they a government cover-up to avoid panic? Some have even pondered if perhaps these cats are more phantom-like beings living amongst us from the realms of another plane. Others have wondered if they are more native than we understand them to be, living with us always, quietly in the shadow, since the days our little island broke away from mainland Europe all those thousands of years ago. The existence of beasts on the islands of the UK is not simply known as the jabberings of a madman in a country pub. In some instances, scientists have taken the claims very seriously and conducted legitimate studies to understand where these sightings may be coming from. These scientists have studied many of the photographs. They have also looked into much of the supposed evidence that has come forward. Over time, specific forensic techniques such as tooth pit analysis on kills have been implemented to find a more accurate answer. They have also studied the remains of prey in the hopes of finding clues to the identity of the predator who had killed them by looking at the marks made whilst feeding. In one case, scientists had concluded that the perpetrator of the livestock deaths in West Wales was a medium-sized cat, which, although not the size of a panther or a puma, is considerably larger than a domestic cat. Almost every newspaper published in the country has run at least one story of the beasts among us, with sightings spreading up and down the kingdom with great confidence. The tabloid newspaper The Sun even ran a story about a supposed sighting as recent as August 2021. That said, a consistent theme amongst these sightings is that they are, more often than not, hoaxes or mistakes. My favourite misunderstanding regarding these creatures came in Hampshire in 2011, when a white tiger was found relaxing in a field. The sightings of what would later be known as the Hampshire tiger resulted in a police force coming together, with experts at hand, with tranquilizer darts locked, loaded, and ready to go. Brilliantly, this white tiger would eventually be revealed as a life-sized stuffed toy that had been left in the field outside. That being said, in 1903, a Canadian lynx was found and shot dead in Newton Abbot amongst Devon, with recent studies on its carcass showing that this animal had been living amongst the wild for some time, although for just how long, we will never know. To dismiss all encounters with big cats as misunderstandings or lies would be disingenuous, as compelling evidence for their existence does pop up from time to time. In 2024, BBC Countryfile ran a story claiming that, for the first time, big cat DNA was found on a carcass in the UK. It was in October 2023 that Sharon Larkin Snowden reportedly came across a carcass, disturbing the animal that had been feeding on it in the Lake District. She would state, "To my right, I saw something black running and assumed it was a sheepdog. Then I did a double take and I realised it was a black cat. It ran towards a stone wall, stopped, and then jumped the wall. It was big, the size of a German Shepherd dog. After taking swabs from the sheep, they were sent to the laboratory at the University of Warwick, which specialises in testing for big cat DNA in a department ran by Professor Robin Allaby. Here, they claim to have made a positive identification that the DNA belongs to a cat from the Panthera genus, which includes 5 species: leopard, lion, tiger, jaguar, and snow leopard. In 2023, hair was collected from a barbed wire fence after a sheep attack on a farm in Gloucestershire, with laboratory results suggesting that its DNA was a 99.9% match for a leopard. Further back, in 1980, a puma was caught in the wilderness of Inverness in Scotland. She was, by this point, growing old and seemed somewhat tame for a wild animal. This led investigators to conclude that this puma, given the name Felicity, was most likely a pet before her eventual release or escape. Nobody knows where Felicity came from or how she got there, with some citing her story as evidence that alien cats have made their way to our wildlife, whilst others see this as a simple, staged event. Either way, Felicity was taken to the Highland Wildlife Park, where she became a minor celebrity amongst the locals and tourists. When Felicity died in 1985, she was made into taxidermy and can still be seen in the Inverness Museum and Art Gallery. It may seem unlikely that such creatures would survive in the wild. We may not be too cold of a country, but we are by no means the lands that these animals evolved to live amongst. That said, it would only take one pregnant female or a mating couple to establish some form of population. It is undeniable that some would have released these big cats into the wild, and it's not necessarily unlikely that some of those released would survive. That being said, for two to find each other and breed is where this narrative grows more unlikely. Some had alleged that Mary Chipperfield of the famous Chipperfield Circus had released 3 pumas, including a breeding pair, onto Dartmoor when her zoo was closed back in 1978. However, it is also worth noting that her family strenuously deny these claims. A big problem the believers of the beast have in convincing those more skeptical of their existence is that most evidence is limited to eyewitness testimony. There are reports of large cats in the United Kingdom at a significantly high number, suggesting that something seems to be going on here. Although we must also wonder how there has been no concrete evidence of these creatures in our countryside yet. We are only a small island after all. I remain curiously skeptical of this particular urban legend, finding myself both agreeing and disagreeing with the notion to certain degrees. That said, the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs has published a list of predatory cats that they know to have escaped in the United Kingdom over time. And although most of these have been recaptured, it is worth noting that most means that some did remain. It is no secret that these creatures avoid human interaction in their natural habitat. It is also not unheard of for them to be sneaky and secretive in their lives. That said, you would think that with all of those looking for these animals, they would stumble across at least some evidence of their existence. There have been several instances where the sightings have been captured on camera. However, it is worth noting that much like the images of Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, these images are always taken from very far away and are almost always blurry or highly pixelated. In Denham, a photograph of what looked to be a black leopard sitting on a mound of grass was taken. I have seen this picture, and it does look compelling. Although, the problems remain that the camera of the phone had zoomed in over 400 meters, leaving the final product with a large amount of blur hidden behind large pixels. The second issue with this picture is that it does seem to have white fur on its chest, a trait known amongst domestic house cats and not amongst panthers. Even so, believers have hit back on this. They suggest that if this image is considered too blurry for much else, it is undoubtedly too blurry to rule out that this panther was chewing on a bone. This argument is not a strong rebuttal, but a rebuttal nevertheless. This back and forth in beliefs and explanations are widespread amongst conspiracy theories and other groups worldwide, with many ABC enthusiasts believing the government is covering up the signs of roadkill and playing down cited reports to avoid panic amongst the general public. It seems there is a wide variety of confusion about the legitimacy of some of the findings regarding the big cats roaming the countryside of the United Kingdom, with conflicting reports, hoaxes, and misinformation blending in with real-life accounts. In 2011, it was announced by the Centre of 14 Zoology that through DNA testing carried out by Durham University, they had proven that hairs found in North Devon showed that a leopard was living in the area. However, the cryptozoologists were hindered again by the skeptics with their findings in 2012. They announced that DNA testing on 2 deer carcasses found in Gloucestershire found only fox DNA, despite many locals reporting sightings of a big cat. Whatever your position on Britain's big cat population, the subject does not seem to be going away anytime soon. It grows quieter for some time, only to appear once more amongst our culture, awakening the excitable fear in those that believe, much like the creatures are said to do in our mysterious world. If you're still with me, then I know you share the same passion for folklore and urban legends that drives this show. But to keep bringing you these stories, I need your help. Every season comes to life with the incredible support of listeners like you on Patreon. For just £3 a month, less than the price of a small coffee, you can help ensure that this show continues to thrive, with shorter breaks between seasons and even more content available. But that's not all. As a Patreon subscriber, you'll unlock exclusive perks like access to our bonus series, Modern Myths, where we dive into lesser-known but equally captivating tales like the Hodag, Black-Eyed Children, the Dark Watchers, and many more. You'll gain instant access to our entire library of bonus content the moment you join, with new chapters coming each season. You'll also get a behind-the-scenes look at how the show is made, discounts on merchandise, and an invitation to our private group chat, where you can connect with me directly and share your love for urban legends with a community of like-minded enthusiasts. Plus, as a special treat, I randomly select patrons to feature in upcoming stories, so you might find yourself becoming part of the very legends we explore. Supporting us on Patreon isn't just about subscribing. It's about joining a team dedicated to preserving and expanding on our collection of folklore. Your contribution directly fuels the research, production, and growth of the show, helping us continue this incredible journey together. So, if you're ready to take the next step and become an integral part of the Urban Legends community, head over to our Patreon page via the link in our show notes and choose the paid subscription. I'm looking forward to seeing you there, where we can keep these tales alive. And now, back to the legend. The sightings of these beasts living amongst us are so widespread and ingrained in our society that to list them all would take hours, leaving those of you who believe to continue that belief, and those of you who do not to continue your skepticism. It is said that the interest in big cats had begun in the latter half of the 1950s, with news stories spreading of the fen tiger. In 1964, a bullock at Bushy Farm was found severely lacerated. The culprit of this attack would be dubbed the Surrey Puma by the press that swarmed it. A plaster cast was eventually taken of a paw print measuring 5 inches across and given to the police, who already had an active file on big cats in the area. When the file was closed in 1967, the logbook had listed 362 sightings of alien big cats occurring between September 1964 and August 1966, although no creature was ever found. In 1968, a farmer claimed to have shot a puma, but he could provide no evidence to prove this. In 1975, an 8-year-old boy was allegedly playing alone in the woodland of Chiddingfold. This woodland reportedly backed onto a field where he claimed to see a golden-coloured big cat entering the trees. The cat stayed close to the edge of the field and turned its head to look at the boy, although it was disinterested in him and continued. When the boy was later asked if it could have been a big dog, he replied, no, because it had a long curved tail, a wide head, and it picked up its feet like a cat, but it was the same size as a big dog. In 1988, the Ministry of Agriculture went as far as to send Royal Marines to search for the rumoured Beast of Exmoor, after a notable increase in the number of mysterious killed livestock. During this time, several Marines claimed to have seen the large cat in fleeting moments, but nothing more than a fox would ever be officially found. In 1991, a Eurasian lynx was shot near Norwich in Norfolk. It had killed around 15 sheep within a fortnight. This story was widely understood to be nothing but an urban legend, being reported on much later in 2003. Although, to much surprise, and in a move that reinforced many beliefs, a police report released in 2006 confirmed that the case was, in fact, genuine. In 1992, interest in the big cats had grown, with headline stories of the Beast of Bodmin, the Beast of Buchan, and the Beast of Dartmoor becoming urban legends in specific areas across the island. In 1995, the Surrey Advertiser newspaper reported a sighting recorded by police officer Steve Ashcroft. In 2003, Detective Constable Stephen Ashcroft appeared again after witnessing either the same animal or one similar. In 2004, locals in the area had reported having seen a big cat, relying on the Big Cat Survey by the British Big Cat Organisation. In 2005, Harry Fowler, visiting with his partner, sent their video camera footage of a feline to a local newspaper, where they were reproduced in stills. It was described as gingery brown and about the size of an Alsatian dog, but it was not a fox. Surrey Wildlife Trust Ranger Mark Havler believed it was actually an Iberian lynx, later receiving 15 calls of sightings in the 2 weeks that followed. Also in 2005, a man who lived in Sydenham Park in southeast London, about 10 minutes from where I am right now, was attacked in his back garden, which backed onto a railway line. The man described the cat as a big black figure who pounced on him with considerable strength, and he was left with scratches all over his body. In 2008, it was reported that a 74-year-old woman was attacked on 2 separate occasions by a large cat in the Scottish Highlands, leaving her with injuries. A Scottish wildcat expert would later conclude that it was most likely a large feral domestic cat living wild, possibly even a hybrid with a Scottish wildcat, but ruled out that a Scottish wildcat was responsible for the attack. In 2012, several sightings of a lion were reported in Essex. Police searched the area using helicopters and infrared cameras, instructing residents to stay in their homes. The next day, the search was called off with no evidence found, with one resident claiming that a photo of the alleged animal was a picture of his pet, a large Maine Coon. Also in 2012, a woman named Helen Smith claimed that 2 of her horses were attacked by a large, jet-black animal, a muscle machine with claws, teeth, and emerald green eyes. The local vet examined the horse with the most wounds upon it, and is reported to have concluded that a large cat indeed carried out the attack. 2020's coronavirus-induced lockdown opened up the world to animals again, as was documented in many capacities all around the globe. Foxes were seen more freely, hedgehogs roamed more casually, dolphins returned to the waters of Venice, and deers began to stroll down quieter streets. Although, with this came a growing number of sightings of these large, dangerous felines, with most people confined to short walks in the country. People across the United Kingdom were seemingly stumbling across mysterious beasts, and their recorded sightings had grown significantly. An element of the urban legend that seems to hold itself down as nothing more than another case of modern folklore is the colouring of the beast itself. So often, the sightings describe the creature as black with yellow or green eyes, alluding to the description of a black panther. This is strange and unlikely, of course, because leopards with the melanistic properties to make them entirely black are very rare to be seen even in the more frequently found places of the world. The black-furred leopard, known as the black panther, is more often seen in Africa and Asia amongst the leopard families that live there. But even these are few and far between, with less than 200 known worldwide. The likelihood of several beasts living in the British countryside for so long seems almost far-fetched and unrealistic to many in the big cat world. So, why do the stories keep emerging of the black cat in the countryside of Britain? Perhaps it's an evolution of a hundreds of years old myth that once lived so prominently across the countryside of our little island. For centuries, a spectral black dog was said to emerge from the shadows of the moors, creating fear amongst those that witnessed it. It has been suggested that the stories of these large black cats are merely modern continuations of those ancient urban legends. It is said that the supernatural elements of the ghost-like dog disappeared with the modern world, now replaced with the more realistic notion of a wild cat roaming the countryside like a demon among us. The black cat remains a fear-inducing, monstrous creature in the minds of those who picture it skulking in the shadows of the moors. Although this strange fear associated with the pigmentation of the cat's fur is not limited to the beasts of Britain. Statistics across the Western world strongly indicate that black cats take longer to adopt than other coloured cats. There are many theories as to why this may be, with some studies suggesting that it may simply be because they are hard to photograph, leading to less attractive listings. A strong theory blames superstition. This plays on the supposed connection a black cat holds to the world's dark forces. This holds onto the negative connotation of witchcraft, bad luck, and evil, manifesting itself as finding black-haired cats creepy, less friendly, and less playful, an assumption that scientific study has legitimized. I have focused on all aspects of the big cats found across the United Kingdom, but the chapter is titled The Beast of Bodmin Moor. In truth, I could have chosen many of the different beastly titles, although the black creature of Bodmin was one that consistently appeared in my research, arguably the godfather of the beasts that live among us. In British folklore, the Beast of Bodmin Moor is a phantom wildcat that lives in the countryside of Cornwall in England, with Bodmin Moor becoming a prominent location of sightings after 1978. With occasional reports of mutilated slain livestock being found by their farmers. Generally, scientists reject the notion that a black cat roamed Bodmin Moors due to the improbably large numbers necessary to maintain a breeding population, alongside potential food supply and the British climate, all of which purportedly make the survival of the creature very unlikely. The Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food conducted an official investigation in 1995, led by two investigators named Simon Baker and Charles Wilson. On the 19th of July 1995, the study concluded that there was no verifiable evidence of exotic felines in Britain, and that the mauled farm animals found were most likely done so by indigenous British species. Strangely, less than a week after the government report, on the 24th of July 1995, a young boy was walking by the River Fowey when he discovered a large cat skull measuring about 4 inches long and 7 inches wide. The skull was missing its lower jaw, but possessed 3 sharp, prominent canines that suggested it may have been a leopard. Unfortunately for the scientists, the report of this found skull hit mainstream audiences at the exact same time as the release of their study, ultimately undermining their conclusions. The skull was sent away to London's Natural History Museum for verification, and here a team of entomologists and zoologists would determine that it was a genuine skull from a young male leopard, but also found that the skull had not died in Britain and had been imported as part of a leopard skin rug. This was due to the clean way in which the skull had been severed from its body, a way commonly used to mount the head on a rug. Inside the skull, they had also found an egg case laid by a tropical cockroach that could not possibly be found in Britain. The skull also indicated that the flesh had been scraped off with a knife and begun to decompose only after a recent immersion in water. This did not stop the expansion of this legend though, nor did it slow down the excitement that came with the Beast of Bodmin Moor. The sightings would continue for years to come, being joined by different beasts in different counties up and down the island. To some, these beasts are paranormal. To others, they are government conspiracies, whilst cryptozoologists and folklorists claim the beasts as their own. It seems the most realistic and plausible explanation for all of this is that several irresponsible owners released these beasts in small numbers across the country just before the 1976 Dangerous Wild Animal Act would come into play. This was legislation specifically intended to halt the growing trend of large exotic pets by implementing a costly license fee. It seems likely that some sightings were legitimate for a short period, while others were reactionary to the hyperbole the excitement had created. Some may have died quickly, others may have been recaptured, some may have remained alive and out in the wilderness for years. They have, most likely, now perished. However, their spirits live on, still being witnessed in the corner of several eyes, a terrifying blur amongst the confused and mistaken witnesses, genuinely becoming the phantom cats of the moors they were once deemed to be. These phantom felines stalking the moors of Britain are exciting and engaging to those who live amongst them, creating an element of fear and buzz in an otherwise simple small town on a little island in Europe. These stories seem filled with misunderstandings, confused sightings, and bright ideas, yet their birth stems from a realistic, plausible, and more probable truth. I say all this as I want to finish with a story from my life that confused me for a long time. I am fully aware that the most likely explanation for what happened was that I misunderstood, and I know that I may be misremembering elements of it. That is human. However, the core of this tale most definitely occurred in 2006. I was walking through the woods of Butler's Cross, a large hill that overlooks the countryside for miles to come in my childhood county of Buckinghamshire. I was walking with my childhood friend as we always did, going for long strolls in the woods. We were following the footpath ahead, when out of the corner of my eye, I saw a significant black figure jump from the trees that reached up from the steep hill to my left. It landed on the ground on the footpath for a split second before continuing its leap to the right, heading further down the large hill we were on. I remember spinning sharply towards it, just missing it as it disappeared into the trees, seeing enough to know it was a cat, but not enough to understand its size. For you see, this seemed far too large to be an ordinary house cat. If it were not for its agility as it leapt down the hill, I would have assumed it was a large black dog, although my mind had instantly registered it as feline. I remember being confused, slightly frightened and excited by the prospect, which suggests that I did not take the threat of it being a giant cat that seriously. Even then, I was fully aware that I most likely witnessed it wrong. But as I turned to my friend to ask him if he had also seen it, he was staring ahead, far more shaken up than me. And he spoke before I could say a word, as he simply asked, "Did you just see a panther?"
Urban Legends is researched, written and produced by Luke Mordew. Original score by Billy Jupp, with additional sounds from storyblocks.com. If you like what you heard and want to hear more, click subscribe on your chosen podcast provider and delve into the mysteries of our previous and future chapters. To find more, including merchandise, video content, images and more, visit urbanlegendsfolklore.com. If you have more information or a correction on something mentioned in this chapter, please get in touch through our website. We aim to ensure that all information provided is accurate and up to date, and this remains a top priority. If you want to support the show, receive early access, and have more of a say in what we do, then become a patron by clicking the link in our show notes. For these chapters in video format, simply search Urban Legends Folklore on YouTube. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Threads, and join our Facebook group by searching Urban Legends Folklore.